Picture this: the most powerful man in Europe, a legend who once held the fate of nations in his hands, now a broken man, exiled to a desolate island in the Atlantic Ocean. Napoleon Bonaparte, once the Emperor of France, now a prisoner of his own downfall. His story, filled with glory and conquest, now ending in tragedy and disgrace. But how did it come to this? How did the man who once dreamed of ruling the world end up a prisoner on a remote island, with his empire shattered and his power reduced to whispers in the wind? Today, we're about to uncover the terrible, controversial end of Napoleon Bonaparte and the shocking truth behind his final days. Let's rewind the clock to 1815. Napoleon had been defeated, his empire crumbled, but the story wasn't over yet. No, it was just beginning. After being exiled to the island of Elba in 1814, Napoleon wasn't the type to simply fade away into obscurity. He was a man who refused to bow to fate. While Europe celebrated his downfall, he was plotting quietly in exile. But he wasn't just biding time. No, Napoleon was a man of action. And in March of 1815, with a mere 1,000 soldiers, he would make the impossible happen. Napoleon's exile wasn't a typical retreat. Elba, a tiny island off the coast of Italy, was far from the miserable prison many would expect. Napoleon wasn't locked away in chains. No, he was the ruler of this tiny island, its political leader and its military commander. But despite having power in this small, self-contained world, Napoleon's thoughts were never far from France. He believed his return to power was inevitable. On the island, he worked tirelessly, plotting his next move, and it wasn't long before he set his sights back on the throne of France. His allies, including some in the French army, remained loyal, secretly ready to back his return. The Emperor of France was not done yet. March 1st, 1815. Napoleon made his move. Escaping Elba with just 1,000 men, he landed on the coast of France. But here's where it gets interesting. Napoleon wasn't marching into enemy territory. He was marching into the heart of a nation that had once adored him. As he made his way across the countryside, his reputation preceded him. Whispers of his return began to spread, and soon the people rallied behind him. The French were tired of the Bourbon monarchy, which had been restored after Napoleon's first abdication. Napoleon, with his magnetic charisma and leadership, was a symbol of hope to them. Napoleon's return was swift. In just 20 days, he marched all the way to Paris, regaining his throne with little resistance. But the clock was ticking. Napoleon had a mere 100 days to prove he could still hold on to power. His return was a symbolic moment for France, but his enemies across Europe were not pleased. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, the coalition that had helped defeat him, were now determined to crush him once and for all. The tension that mounted during these 100 days reached its peak at Waterloo, Napoleon's final battle, a battle that would decide his fate and the fate of Europe. The French army, though loyal, was exhausted. Napoleon, who had been through many wars, could feel the weight of his decisions pressing on him. The British were led by the Duke of Wellington, a skilled tactician, and the Prussians were commanded by General Blucher. Napoleon had always relied on his tactical brilliance to win battles, but this time, things didn't go as planned. On June 18, 1815, the battle raged for hours. Napoleon's forces struggled against the might of the Allied forces. Despite initial success, the tide of the battle shifted when the Prussian army arrived late in the day, catching Napoleon's forces off guard. With both fronts collapsing, Napoleon's army was scattered. The Emperor of France, the conqueror of Europe, watched in horror as his empire crumbled before his eyes. It wasn't just a defeat on the battlefield, it was the complete destruction of his dreams. Napoleon, in his final moments, realized there would be no escape this time. He was forced to surrender. The man who once held the fate of Europe in his hands was now reduced to a prisoner, awaiting his exile once more. After Waterloo, Napoleon was sent into captivity on the island of Saint Helena, located in the remote South Atlantic. But this time, there would be no dramatic return. Napoleon's empire, the one he had built from nothing, was gone for good. Saint Helena was far from the lavish palaces Napoleon had once inhabited. The island was bleak and isolated, a tiny speck of land surrounded by the vast ocean. Napoleon was no longer the mighty conqueror, but a prisoner, stripped of his power, far from the grandeur of his empire. His health began to decline rapidly. The man who had once led armies across Europe now lay bedridden. His once sharp mind seemed clouded by frustration, regret, and possibly depression. The isolation was taking its toll, and the man who had once ruled the fate of nations now seemed powerless. As Napoleon's health deteriorated, rumors began to spread. What caused his rapid decline? Was it simply the stress of his downfall, the weight of defeat, or something more sinister? Some believe that Napoleon's health was slowly eaten away by the harsh conditions of Saint Helena. The island had a poor climate, and the dampness and isolation surely took a toll on his body. But others suspect foul play. Could he have been poisoned? There is a dark theory surrounding Napoleon's death that refuses to die: the poisoning theory. According to some historians, Napoleon was murdered by being poisoned with arsenic, a deadly substance that leaves no trace in the body if administered carefully over time. In the years after his death, researchers discovered that Napoleon's hair contained high levels of arsenic. This shocking discovery led to speculation that Napoleon was poisoned, possibly by his British captors. But who stood to gain from his death? And why would they go to such lengths? Napoleon spent his final days on Saint Helena in a small, simple house. By all accounts, he was physically weak, but his mind was still sharp in his later years. He would often reflect on his past, on his glory days, and express frustration at his fall from power. But was this truly the end? As Napoleon lay dying, his body weakened further. His last words were reportedly, "France, armée, tête d'armée." He was still thinking of his beloved France and the army that had once followed him into battle. Napoleon died on May 5th, 1821, at the age of 51. Napoleon's death didn't mark the end of his influence. His legacy would live on far beyond his time. In France, he remained a symbol of strength and revolution, a leader who fought for the common man and changed the course of history. Even today, Napoleon is both revered and reviled. Some see him as a tyrant, others as a visionary. He built an empire that spanned much of Europe, introduced legal reforms with the Napoleonic Code, and altered the map of Europe forever. But in the end, his empire was reduced to ruins, and his final days were spent in isolation. A man who had once controlled an entire continent, now confined to a tiny island, a prisoner of his own ambitions. Napoleon Bonaparte's story is one of ambition, power, and the brutal consequences of chasing greatness at any cost. His life serves as a cautionary tale about the price of ambition. It's a story of glory, defeat, and a final fall into obscurity. Was Napoleon's death truly the result of a natural illness? Or was it the calculated move of those who feared his return? We may never know the full truth. One thing is certain: Napoleon's life, his downfall, and his death will continue to haunt history for generations to come. Thanks for watching this gripping tale. If you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video with others who love history.